Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be another episode standout for The Mandalorian Season 3, I meant the Book of Boba Fett Episode 6. Now just to be aware, there will be spoilers throughout this review, so just look out just in case you haven't seen the previous episodes within the Book of Boba Fett or indeed The Mandalorian. Now as we all know, the premise within this show has been former bounty hunter Boba Fett looking to reclaim and establish his criminal empire or organisation, which we saw the beginnings at the end of the end credit scenes for The Mandalorian Season 2 finale. Mixed in with the narrative of flashbacks, seeing how Boba Fett escapes the Sarlacc pit at the end of Return of the Jedi, and we saw how his story since that moment connected to the current timeline. Now to say that the show has taken a massive detour in the last two episodes is a massive understatement. Last week, of course, we established the whereabouts of Din Djarin, known as Mandalorian. We got some exposition on the history of Mandalore. We saw him build the ship and then connect again with Fennec Sand, stating how she wants him to meet up with Boba Fett in order to provide some muscle against the fight with the Pike Syndicate. And ever since that episode, and probably a bit before that, there's been so much debate on whether the Book of Boba Fett is actually more of a Mandalorian show rather than a show chronicling the tales of Boba Fett himself. And I think that argument has had a lot of justification, particularly when we looked at the previous episodes. And this episode 6 really doubled down on that assumption. Overall, I thought it was a very good episode. There was a lot of very cool moments. It was filled to the absolute brim with a lot of fan service, and I've seen a lot of social media reaction online. A lot of Star Wars fans would have been jumping for joy and screaming at the various appearances of certain characters throughout this particular episode. But when I look at this episode overall, it really was kind of half a Mandalorian episode, and then even then, it was more half of what we were later on building towards future shows regarding the Star Wars universe. We saw this right away from the beginning, where we saw the return of Timothy Olyphant as the Marshal, if you remember from the earlier Mandalorian episodes, and this is when he came to prominence with some of the Pike Syndicate members. And it was good to see Timothy Olyphant returning in this role. I thought he performed very well when he appeared earlier on in the show. But then we caught back up with Mandalorian. If you remember, he stated at the end of the previous episode that he went to see an old friend. Of course, we all knew this to be Grogu. And they arrived on this home planet. And this is where, of course, we saw the reappearance of R2-D2. And then later on, Ahsoka as well, played by Rosario Dawson. Again, she was another appearance within Mandalorian Season 2. And then, once again, we got an appearance that I'm sure everybody got excited about. And that was, of course, Luke Skywalker, all CGI, as he continued Grogu's Jedi training. Though, in a conversation with Ahsoka, he established very much so that he wasn't necessarily training him. He was there more to help Grogu reclaim all of his memories. Now, this was a bit of an issue because this was really the first conversation that we had between Luke and Ahsoka, and considering the fact that Ahsoka, of course, was under the tutelage of Luke's father Anakin, this really should have been a far more of a bigger moment within all of the Star Wars universe. This is something I felt they maybe could have saved for the Ahsoka series, because of course Ahsoka had that very deep bond with Anakin, and then seeing Anakin's son for the first time, that would have provided a lot emotional weight you would have felt seeing these two come together for the first time. So a bit of a missed opportunity there. But in terms of Luke Skywalker himself, following the reappearance from The Mandalorian Season 2, where they used a lot of the CGI footage from Mark Hamill from previous movies, I do have to say that it did look very good. Whenever Luke was much more in the stationary expressions, when he was looking to the sky or looking to the side, when he was training with the lightsaber, that was very good. When we saw Grogu looking at him as Luke was wielding the lightsaber, all of these moments looked very convincing. You never really doubted at all that in terms of the CGI rendering. It was only when the characters started talking that you could notice a bit of staticness, a bit of lagging in terms of the mouth and the syncing with the audio as well. Now, we have to give leeway here because this is a CGI treatment that is still very much in terms of trying to be perfected. We have, of course, seen this method be used very commonly within the Marvel films, but they're taking the actors who still look very much in their prime and then just de-aging them. Now obviously Mark Hamill looks far more older than what he did in Return of the Jedi, so it's very much more about using stock footage here, but I think it looked very good, and it does bode a lot of interesting questions going line within the future in terms of whether we will see iconic characters being brought back in terms of a CGI rendering for future installments, but that's a discussion for another day. Now a very good sequence as well is when we saw Luke reawakening Grogu's memories, and we saw a flashback dream sequence of what was Order 66. Now, if you remember from Revenge of the Sith, this was the initiative by Palpatine in order to destroy all of the Jedi by the clone soldiers. And this is a very good sequence where we saw Grogu looking as several Jedi were being taken down by the clone soldiers or the stormtroopers within the corridor. So very good, intense scene, very atmospheric, again just giving a lot of callbacks to Order 66. It does raise an interesting question of how exactly Grogu escaped this attack on a Jedi temple and who particularly saved him. Because it wouldn't have been Mace Windu and it wouldn't have been Ahsoka, so who exactly saved Grogu from this attack? We will wait and see. I'm pretty much sure they will establish this either in season 3 of The Mandalorian or maybe even the Ahsoka series later on down the line. Now, I feel another missed opportunity here was not having the Mandalorian actually reunite with Grogu, because that was the whole reason why he came there in the first place. So just to have him come all that way to visit the planet and not actually speak with Grogu, I think again just didn't feel true to the overall story, particularly building on the connection between Mandalorian and Grogu. So I feel that was another missed opportunity. So Mandalorian leaves the planet and then rejoins with Fennec Sand, and we actually got to see the actual lead character of this series, Boba Fett, for all of about 60 seconds as they were discussing their plans to take on the Pike Syndicate. Mandalorian establishes that they're going to need far more supportive forces, so this is when he goes back to talk to the Marshal and asks for more support in taking down the Pike Syndicate. And it was following this scene where we got another major reveal that would have got fans even more excited, where we see a Lone Ranger walking up to the town, and then we see that it's actually revealed as Cad Bane. Now, if any of you remember, Cad Bane was a bounty hunter seen in the CGI Star Wars Clone Wars series, who I believe we saw his final appearance in that show way back in season 4 when he plotted to kidnap the back then Chancellor Palpatine before Obi-Wan spoiled their plans. I do believe he's also recently appeared in the likes of Rebels and also The Bad Batch as well. But admittedly, this was a very cool scene, very Sergio Leone like in terms of the westerns, with Bane walking up to the Marshal and claiming that the city was being taken under ownership of the Syndicate. The basic deal here was that they wanted them to stay out of the battle with Boba Fett's forces and just let it play out. Now, one of the Marshal's soldiers was getting involved, and then that's when we see Cad Bane shoot him, and then also he shoots the Marshal. At first I thought he killed him, but after watching the scene again, he seems to strike him in the shoulder, and I believe there's a line spoken by one of the ongoing crowd that the Marshal needs help badly. So I think the Marshal has survived this encounter, and maybe Cad Bane wanted to leave somebody alive as a message for anybody else wanting to get involved in the overall conversation. But I have to say, in terms of Cad Bane, the rendition was very good. We all know him, he's got these blue skin and these sharpened teeth along with these big red eyes, and I thought it looked very well. When you compare it to the animated version, it was a very good live action rendition, and this is again bridging that gap between the animated universe and indeed live action. Of course, we saw previously as well Ahsoka being brought to live action along with Bo-Katan as well, so I'm pretty much sure going further down the line as we get a furthering of these Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, we're going to see more and more characters, particularly from the Clone Wars, being brought to live action. But in terms of this rendition, this was a very good adaptation of the character. Now, I did think it was a bit strange that Cad Bane seemed to just walk out of nowhere. He didn't seem to be accompanied by any ship or any soldiers. He just seemed to walk in a long distance on his own. But still, that he still looked very good. And then go back to the bar in Mos Espa, where we saw Garsa Fwip, who owned the bar and had previous conversations with Boba Fett, and a package comes within the bar and it turns out to be a bomb and the bar exploded. So this is the earliest stages of the bigger conflict within the Pike Syndicate. And then we go back to the planet with Luke and Grogu, and then this is probably one of the biggest issues that I had with the entire episode. Luke, sensing Grogu's emotional bond with Mandalorian, gives him essentially a choice. He opens up the gift that Mandalorian brought to Grogu, which essentially was the chain-like Beskar armor. If you remember, this is something that they constructed from the previous episode where Mando handed over the Beskar spear and they molded it into the armor for Grogu. Luke gives Grogu a choice where basically he can take the lightsaber that was given to him by the older Yoda, as we remember from the movies, and stay with Luke to train him, or he can take the Beskar armor and rejoin Mandalorian. Now, the issue I had here is that, first of all, how the hell is Grogu expected to hold that lightsaber, yet alone wield it at this stage? We saw earlier on with the training sequences, which were very good, where Yoda was learning to master the Force. So I understand they were trying to give that overall choice that Grogu had to make, but it just made very little sense. It came across as a bit comical as little baby Grogu was trying to reach out and grasp the lightsaber, because at this stage he's not really ready for it, yet alone wield it in battle. So that was a bit of a issue for me in some sense, and also in terms of the choice itself, because how can Grogu at this stage really comprehend the choice that he's being asked to by Luke? Surely Luke should want to fully train Grogu first in all of the ways of the Force before giving him that eventual decision. At this stage, Grogu is just not mature enough to make that sort of choice. So in many ways, this just feels like an excuse to reteam Grogu with The Mandalorian for Season 3. As I stated in my review for Mandalorian Season 2, and particularly the finale, that episode really could have been a series finale for the show itself, where we saw Grogu going ahead of Luke, and I thought if there was ever going to be a Season 3 for The Mandalorian, it would have centered far more on Mandalorian joining up with Bo-Katan in the battle to reclaim Mandalore, as that was the only real potential continuation I could see going forward for the series. But as we all know, the writers and everybody is well aware, the biggest selling point of The Mandalorian is indeed seeing Mando and Baby Yoda or Grogu together on their various adventures, and they clearly want to return to that status quo. Now for me, this is a regressive step within the story, but it's what the fans want. Baby Yoda or Baby Grogu has been a massive selling point for Disney Star Wars, and they clearly want to milk more of that. So the whole plot of Luke giving Grogu a choice just really felt a bit of a manipulation in my eyes, and just one of convenience, as we all know for sure Grogu is going to choose the Beskar armor and go back to join Mandalorian. Now it poses interesting questions of who exactly is going to take Grogu back. Are they going to recall Mandalorian to come and collect him? Is Ahsoka going to bring him back? Is Luke going to bring him back? Now, I don't think it will be Luke or Ahsoka, because that won't really make any sense, because if they bring him back, will they not want to get involved in the battle against the Pike Syndicate? That will really tip the odds in their favour if indeed Luke or Ahsoka, or even both of them, joined out to help them battle against the Pike Syndicate. But again, this will take away even more of the presence, if there's any left, of Boba Fett himself. Now, I've seen some reaction where people have asked, is this them beginning the seeds in terms of linking this overall story to the sequel trilogy, where of course we learned that Luke was eventually going to train Ben Solo, and of course when we look back on the episode, we saw the various droids seemingly building up the foundations for the Jedi Temple for Luke to train the new students, and of course eventually we saw this to be destroyed through the emergence of Ben Solo, who would then go on to become Kylo Ren. Now, I don't think there will be a connection here, because if you think about it, the emergence of Ben Solo is really years away from Luke, who is now just post the events of Return of the Jedi. And I also think it would be a big mistake to try and link anything in terms of the sequel trilogy. As we all know, despite the fact that they did gross over $1 billion each, there has really been a big bad aftertaste from the sequel trilogy, and I don't think this is the right time now to hint at any continuation or connection to that trilogy right now. I think very much in terms of a franchise, Star Wars is trying to build or rebuild an excitement and hype with the fans, hence why we saw so many fan service characters appear in this overall episode. So I think it would be a very bad tactic to try and drop hints or reference the sequel trilogy at this point in time. But I think the far bigger issue is that it once again brings up the original question concerning the Book of Boba Fett, is that really it's less of a story about Boba Fett and far more of a setup for The Mandalorian Season 3. Did the writers have any real investment in terms of Boba Fett in terms of an actual story? We all know that Mandalorian Season 3 was pushed back a year, and did they create the Book of Boba Fett just because they needed content to fill that gap? And they decided, instead of creating a new character, they would just feed off an already fan favourite. Now, many fans won't care, because they'll just be happy at seeing all of these iconic characters reappear within this episode. But I do think it's a point worth making that, in many ways, this is much more of trying to manipulate the audience by throwing in Boba Fett, making audiences think that they're going to get a real big story involved with this character, when actually it hasn't turned out this way. Actually, this was all one big operation to keep fans invested for The Mandalorian Season 3. And as I mentioned before, we get plenty of memory berries and fan service appearances. So I think it's very much of a disappointment for anybody who was invested far more in Boba Fett as a particular character. And it really shows, I think, that there was no real plan going forward for this show. But we'll wait and see what happens in the season finale, which will be aired the following week, of course. How much involved will Boba Fett actually be in his own particular show? Will he get actually more than a minute screen time? Or will we get caught up in all of the hype surrounding Mandalorian and the return of Grogu? And will Luke and Ahsoka play even a more prominent role? How prominently will Cad Bane be involved this time round? Will they save his appearances far more of a show later on down the line? But despite that, a very good episode, a standout episode in the Book of Boba Fett. Overall, I'll probably say that this was probably the best episode, even though Boba Fett was barely in it. Talking about episodes involving Boba Fett, I would still say episode 2 was the best episode overall in terms of actually showing Boba Fett. But overall, a good episode, lots of cool moments, lots of elements to get a lot of fans excited. for the show overall, but I just query the overall intention and very much more the gesture in terms of providing a show that really isn't about Boba Fett, but feels far more of a setup for The Mandalorian Season 3. And also I've got particular issues as the way, particularly the whole narrative between Luke and Grogu was handled, really just to get back to a status quo for The Mandalorian Season 3 as well. But those are my overall thoughts and feelings on what was definitely a standout episode within the Book of Boba Fett. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Were you very pleased to see all of these fan favourite characters returning in some way, shape or form? Or are you, like me, very much questioning the whole motive and the whole manipulation again of really creating a Boba Fett show that's ended up not really being about Boba Fett at all? He's barely appeared in the last 2 episodes, and the fact that this is clearly now setting up more for Mandalorian Season 3. Do you feel there's something a bit disingenuous about the whole operation, or do you not really care because you're getting your Star Wars fix with all these iconic characters? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will of course also provide a review of perhaps a season finale and also a season review of the Book of Boba Fett as well, so look out for those in the near future as well. Please also hit and like the subscription buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.